Welcome to our video about the OG of American history, George Washington. He's not just the guy on the dollar bill, but also the leader who chopped down cherry trees and supposedly had wooden teeth. Ouch. Join us as we delve into the life and legacy of this iconic figure who was anything but ordinary. We'll uncover the man behind the myths, from his early years and military career to his leadership in the Revolutionary War and his pivotal role in the formation of the United States. Get ready to separate fact from fiction and discover what made this iconic figure a true legend. As always, let us start at the beginning. The early days of George Washington. Before he was a hero, he was just a kid growing up in Virginia. Little Georgie was born in 1732, the son of a tobacco farmer and a mom who sadly passed away when he was just 11 years old. Despite the loss, young George had a good upbringing and received a decent education. And, fun fact, he was a bit of a prankster as a kid. Who knew the future father of our country had a mischievous side? Despite the difficult circumstances, George received a solid education and showed an early interest in military matters. He was also known for his adventurous spirit and sense of humor, often playing pranks on his friends and family. There's a story that he once threw a rock at a cherry tree and, when confronted by his father, said, "I cannot tell a lie. I did it with my little hatchet." Whether or not this story is true, it shows that even as a child, George had a reputation for honesty and integrity. As a kid, he went to school on and off from ages 7 to 15. He had a few different teachers, including a church sexton and a guy named Williams. We still have some of his schoolwork, which shows he was pretty good at practical math like gauging and mensuration. He also studied geography and maybe even some Latin. Plus, he read some classic English literature like The Spectator. But here's the thing, George's real education didn't come from books. Nope, he learned most of his skills from hands-on work and hanging out with practical folks. He was an expert in growing tobacco and raising livestock, and he even knew how to survey land by the time he was a teenager. He was already plotting fields before most of us even knew how to spell trigonometry. When George Washington was just 11 years old, his father passed away, leaving him under the care of his half-brother Lawrence, who was a great influence on his upbringing. Lawrence inherited the stunning estate of Little Hunting Creek, which he developed into a 2,500-acre holding, naming it Mount Vernon after his commanding admiral. While living there with Lawrence and his wife Anne Fairfax, George was exposed to a more refined world, with Anne being a cultured and gracious woman, and Lawrence bringing knowledge from his English schooling and naval service. George's mind and manners were further developed by valuable neighbors and relatives, including the Carlyles of Alexandria and George William Fairfax. As a young man, George Washington first pursued surveying as a profession. He had the opportunity to assist with surveying Lord Fairfax's vast properties in northern Virginia and the Shenandoah Valley. Washington kept a diary during the surveying trip, which revealed his observation skill and described his encounters with various challenges. The following year, with Lord Fairfax's help, Washington was appointed as the official surveyor of Culpeper County. He worked as a surveyor for over 2 years, traveling far beyond the Tidewater region into the western wilderness. The years 1751-52 were significant turning points in Washington's life, as they put him in charge of Mount Vernon. His brother Lawrence was suffering from tuberculosis, so they traveled to Barbados for his health, where Washington contracted a mild case of smallpox. Sadly, Lawrence passed away in July of the next year, making Washington the executor and residuary heir of his estate in case his daughter Sarah didn't have any children. As Sarah passed away within 2 months, Washington, at the young age of 20, became the head of one of Virginia's finest estates. Let's fast forward to Washington's early military career. George Washington was appointed as a major in the Virginia militia in February 1753, and later he became a colonel in command of the Virginia Regiment. He had a bit of a rough start in his military career, with some setbacks and defeats in battles. But he was determined to keep learning and improving his skills, and he eventually became one of the greatest military leaders in American history. The Revolutionary War, which lasted from 1775 to 1783, was a turning point in American history. It was during this war that George Washington emerged as a true leader and hero. As Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army, Washington led his troops through many hardships, including harsh winter conditions, food and supply shortages, and battles against the well-trained British Army. Despite all these challenges, Washington remained a steady and inspiring presence for his troops. One of the most famous moments of the war occurred on Christmas night in 1776, when Washington led his troops across the Delaware River to launch a surprise attack on the Hessian soldiers stationed in Trenton, New Jersey. The attack was successful, and it gave the Continental Army a much-needed morale boost. Throughout the war, Washington's strategic thinking and leadership skills were on full display. He often made difficult decisions that required him to weigh the potential risks and benefits for his army and the cause of independence. He also worked closely with his top generals, including Lafayette, Greene, and Knox, to plan and execute successful military campaigns. Of course, not everything went smoothly for Washington during the war, including the Battle of Brandywine and the Battle of Germantown. However, he always bounced back and continued to lead his troops with determination and courage. In the end, it was Washington's leadership and perseverance that helped secure America's victory in the Revolutionary War. He went on to become the first president of the United States, and his legacy as a military leader and statesman is still celebrated today. Washington resigned his commission at the end of the American Revolutionary War, and it was quite a surprise to many. You see, he had been a great leader and commander-in-chief of the Continental Army, and people were expecting him to continue in that role. But as it turns out, he was ready to hang up his military hat and return to civilian life. Some say it was because he wanted to spend more time at home with his beloved Martha, while others speculate that he was simply tired of all the marching and fighting. Perhaps he had just grown weary of sleeping in a tent and eating hardtack and salted beef. Whatever the reason, it was a big decision for Washington to step down from his position. It was like the world's greatest quarterback retiring after winning the Super Bowl. But he did it with grace and humility, showing that he was not only a great warrior, but also a true gentleman. And when he announced his resignation to Congress, he did it with a simple and heartfelt speech. He thanked his fellow soldiers for their service and expressed his hope that America would continue to prosper and grow. So while it may have been a shock to some, Washington's resignation was a fitting end to an illustrious military career. And who knows, maybe he was looking forward to finally getting a good night's sleep in a real bed. After the war, George Washington was the most famous person in America. People were asking him to be king, but he didn't want that job. Instead, he went back to farming and being a normal person again. But he couldn't stay away from public service for long. Soon, he was asked to write a new constitution for the country. And when the country finally got around to making a president, everyone agreed that George Washington should be the first one. So he was back in charge again. And this time, he had a fancy new title, Mr. President. President Washington, the man, the myth, the legend. After leading the Continental Army to victory and helping to secure American independence, he became the first president of the United States in 1789. As president, Washington was determined to set a strong example for future leaders. He was known for his serious and dignified demeanor, earning him the nickname Father of his Country. But don't let his serious face fool you. He could also crack a good joke or two. Washington was instrumental in creating the framework for the new government, establishing the 3 branches of government and the idea of checks and balances. He also established many important precedents, such as the 2-term limit for presidents, sorry FDR, and the tradition of delivering an annual State of the Union address. However, being president wasn't all serious business for Washington. He was also quite the party animal, in a good way, of course. He was so good at being president that everyone wanted him to do it again. But George was getting pretty old by then, and he was ready to retire for good. So he did something that no one had ever done before. He said no to being president a 3rd time. And with that, George Washington rode off into the sunset. Well, not literally. He retired to his farm at Mount Vernon. Washington fell ill after inspecting his properties in freezing rain and snow, which goes to show that even the greatest of men can catch a cold. However, things took a turn for the worse when his doctors tried to cure him with bloodletting and other questionable medical practices. Let's just say that the medical field has come a long way since then. Despite the doctor's efforts, Washington passed away on December 14, 1799. But his legacy lives on as he continues to be a revered figure in American history. And did you know that there was even a rumor that Washington's body was stolen after his death? It's true. His family had to set up extra security measures to prevent any potential grave robbers. Talk about leaving a lasting impression even after death.